All right, we are about to dive into one of the biggest, most fundamental questions in all of biology. It's a question that seems so simple, you probably think you already know the answer. But it has stumped the world's best scientists for centuries.
I mean, seriously, what is a species? You've got an idea in your head, right? A dog is a species, a cat is a species, a human, a species. Seems pretty simple. We see them, we name them, we put them into a neat little box. But what if I told you that that neat little box doesn't really exist?
That's not a typo, over 26. And this is not some small, nerdy argument. It's a huge debate known as the species problem. And it really makes you realize something fascinating. A species isn't so much a hard and fast rule of nature as it is a concept we invented to try and make sense of reality that's messy, beautiful, and always, always evolving. You know, our whole idea of what a species is has been on a wild ride. It all started way back in 1735 with Carl Linnaeus, the guy who gave us the system of organizing life just based on what it looks like. Then, of course, Darwin comes along and just blows the doors off everything, showing that species aren't static things. They're constantly changing. Fast forward about a century, and Ernst Mayr shifts the whole conversation from looks to breeding. And then, well, then the DNA revolution came and changed the game all over again.
Okay, so to really get our heads around this problem, we have to look at the two heavyweights, the classic definitions that pretty much battled for control of modern biology for decades, defining a species by how it looks versus whether it can make babies. So this is the original, the Linnaean method. The morphological species concept is just intuitive. You know, if it looks like a duck, swims like a duck, and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. And what's great about this is that it's super useful. You can apply it to a flower in your garden or a T-Rex fossil. All you need are your eyes. But then, in 1942, this biologist, Ernst Mayr, he comes along with this totally revolutionary idea. He said, you know, what a species looks like isn't nearly as important as what it does. For him, the key wasn't appearance, it was reproduction. His big idea, the biological species concept, or BSC, says that if two critters can breed and their offspring can also have babies, they're the same species. It's all about whether their genes can mix.
So let's put these two head to head. On one hand, you have the morphological concept. Super simple, works for fossils, awesome. But, and this is a big but, it gets totally fooled by what are called cryptic species, animals that look completely identical to us, but are actually genetically different and can't breed with each other. On the other hand, the biological concept gives us this really clear, testable rule, gene flow. But it has its own massive blind spots. I mean, what do you do with the millions of species, like bacteria, that don't even have sex? Or, again, what about those fossils? You can't exactly get two dinosaurs to try and breed.
And this is where the biological species concept really starts to fall apart. It just doesn't work for bacteria, for fossils, for tons of plants that just love to hybridize with each other. And then you get these really bizarre situations, like the Encetina salamanders out in California. They live in this ring shape around a valley. Now, any population can breed with its direct neighbor, but when the two ends of the ring loop back and meet each other, they can't breed at all. So are they one species or two? It's a total paradox.
So, faced with all these problems, scientists realized they were missing a couple of key ingredients in the recipe. They needed to think bigger. They needed to add in deep time. And they needed to think about what an organism actually does in the world.
To solve that whole fossil problem, paleontologists came up with the evolutionary species concept. Now, this idea thinks of a species as its own unique story unfolding through time. It's a single, unbroken line from ancestor to descendant that keeps itself separate from all the other storylines. And this is a really powerful way to think because it lets you track a species' journey across millions of years of Earth's history.
Around the same time, another cool idea was brewing, the ecological species concept. This one argues that a species is defined by its job, its unique role or its niche in an ecosystem. So it's not just about what you look like or who you can breed with, it's about what you do. Are you the specific kind of bee that pollinates this one rare orchid? Are you the wolf that keeps the deer population in check? That unique role in the whole web of life is what makes you a species.
For decades, all these different ideas were kind of floating around.
each one useful in its own way. But then, in the late 20th century, a technological earthquake just shook biology to its absolute core and completely changed the species debate forever. And I am talking, of course, about the DNA revolution.
One of the most incredible tools to come out of this was DNA barcoding. The idea behind it is just genius in its simplicity. You find a short, standard piece of a gene that acts like a universal barcode for every single species on Earth. And this data led to a whole new idea, the phylogenetic species concept. Basically, it defines a species as the smallest distinct twig on the giant branching family tree of life.
And the sheer scale of this barcoding project is just mind-boggling. The main global database, which is called BOLD, already has over 780,000 different species logged, each with its own unique barcode. It's like an unprecedented library of life. Scientists can now identify a species from just a tiny scrap of tissue, a single drop of water, or a bit of dirt. Now, here's where it gets really wild. This DNA analysis started uncovering these cryptic species everywhere. These are creatures that look absolutely identical to each other, but genetically they're worlds apart. Things that we thought were one species for hundreds of years turned out to be 2 or 3 or even more, all just hiding in plain sight. It turns out our eyes had been lying to us this whole time.
So, where does all of this leave us? With all these different ideas, which one is the right one? Well, the modern answer is kind of a twist. It's none of them. And also, all of them. The reality, as scientists see it now, is way more integrated and honestly way more interesting. The way to think about it is that each concept is a different tool for a different job. The morphological concept, great for a quick ID when you're out in the fields. The biological, super powerful for understanding how animal groups stay distinct. The evolutionary concept is your go-to for deep time in fossils. And that phylogenetic one we just talked about, its strength is that you can apply it to anything, but it can also lead to what some scientists call species splitting, where you end up creating tons of new species on paper based on tiny genetic differences.
So, because no single definition is perfect, modern biologists basically act like detectives. They use something called integrative taxonomy. This just means they gather all the possible evidence, what it looks like, who it breeds with, what its job is, and of course what its DNA says. They use every single tool in the toolbox to build the most complete case file they can.
And don't for a second think this is just some dusty academic argument. This debate has massive real-world consequences. How you define a species literally determines how many species we think exist on Earth. It decides which animals get legal protection under laws like the Endangered Species Act. It even creates this tension between older conservation policy, which wants to save distinct things, and modern genomics, which wants to save the genetic potential for future evolution. At the end of the day, how we answer this question decides where we spend our limited and precious conservation money.
And this story is far from over. The technology is just moving at lightning speed. With environmental DNA or eDNA, we can now tell you every fish that lives in a lake just from one bottle of water. CRISPR technology is leading to handheld gadgets that can identify a species right there in the field in under 20 minutes. And now, artificial intelligence is being used to comb through these enormous genetic databases, basically automating the process of discovering new species. The revolution is absolutely still happening.
Which leaves us with one final, really provocative thought. Right now, as we face the 6th mass extinction, and as technologies like gene editing start to blur the very lines of what is natural, what do we really need more? A single, theoretically perfect definition of what a species is, or a flexible, practical toolkit that helps us make the best, wisest decisions we can to protect the incredible, beautiful diversity of life on this planet? That's a question we all have to answer now.